The Seahawks introduced their new starting quarterback on Thursday at the VMAC. Why is Sam Darnold and the organization optimistic about the future with him joining the fold? Going to be breaking it all down here on my Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're tuning in from Cannon Beach, Oregon, or down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Sam Darnold introduced as the Seahawks' new quarterback today at the VMAC. He signed his contract on Thursday and now gets the opportunity to take the next step in his career. Going to be diving into all the key takeaways coming out of that press conference featuring Darnold, Mike Macdonald, and Clint Kubiak. Plus, got a Thursday mailbag. You're going to take a look at a factor that may help you predict who the Seahawks are going to sign next in free agency. It's a jam-packed episode, so let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. As anticipated, since Monday's news broke, the Seahawks had agreed to terms with Sam Darnold on a 3-year, $100.5 million contract. The team introduced him for his first press conference on Thursday, and he even looks like he's ready to be in the Pacific Northwest, sporting a nice flannel outfit coming up to the stage. Looks like he's ready to play in Seattle. Sam Darnold had this to say for his opening statement.
First and foremost, I'm just excited to be here. Excited to, get to know this organization. I've already met, I think most of the people, not most of the people, but some of the people I'll be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So excited just to meet my teammates. I've met a couple of the new ones already, D-Law, Josh, just very, very excited to get to meet everyone. And just about this organization, man, I've heard so many good things about this organization from, different guys that have played here, retired, and still playing in the league. You hear nothing but great things about this organization. And, man, I'm just so excited to be a part of it. Excited to meet some of the fans, the 12s. Playing here, I think I've played here a total of 3 times, actually played twice. I was a backup in San Francisco. Working with Clint here one of those times, and it's an unbelievable atmosphere at Lumen Field. And I'm so excited to finally have those 12s on my side this time. Yeah, man, just really looking forward to this opportunity to be here with my teammates, with these coaches. I think we have an opportunity to do something very, very special here, but it's gonna take a lot of hard work, and we know that. I know that going in. And, just very excited to take this one day at a time. And that's going to be that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my head down and go to work, and just excited to do that.
As you would expect with any introductory press conference for a new quarterback, there was a lot of optimism from Sam Darnold, Mike Macdonald, and Clint Kubiak. But it doesn't seem unfounded when you consider the fact that Sam Darnold did have the best year of his career by a very wide margin last year in Minnesota, 35 touchdown passes, over 4,300 passing yards. The Vikings went 14-3 with him as the starting quarterback, and he's only 27 years old. It was interesting listening to John Schneider and Mike Macdonald during the course of the day today, rehashing what really went down to the quarterback position. And John Schneider made it sound like there really wasn't much of a negotiation with Geno Smith. They gave an offer, didn't get anything back, and they quickly pivoted to a list of other quarterbacks. They traded Geno Smith. Sam Darnold was atop that list. They zeroed in on him, and now he's the quarterback. And the reason he was at the top of that list, again, I mentioned the age of 27, the season he's coming off of. Mike Macdonald still believes that this is very much a player that is trending upward, heading to the Pacific Northwest. And I quote, "I think Sam's best days are ahead of him." Talking to some of our defensive guys, you definitely feel Sam's poise, competitiveness, accuracy The downfield threat is definitely part of it. Sam can do it with the best of them. And the Seahawks got to see a firsthand experience with that in December when Darnold came into Lumen Field on a rainy afternoon, threw 3 touchdown passes, had no turnovers in that game. One of those touchdowns was a 39-yard game winner to Justin Jefferson, the play that my friend Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings was referencing a couple days ago here on our podcast, talking about how great of a throw that was for the Minnesota Vikings quarterback, beating the coverage, stepping up in the pocket. Those are the type of plays the Seahawks are paying Sam Darnold to be able to make, and they got to see a front-hand, first-person view of it in that game. No turnovers, 3 touchdowns in the rain, played absolutely fantastic football for the Minnesota Vikings in that game. And so that's part of the assessment, and it makes it really interesting for Mike McDonald and John Schneider that last year they talked about Sam Howell when they brought him in, the great game he had against the Seahawks playing for the Commanders, and then gets to trade for him. Now you have another Sam on your roster that you were really impressed by, obviously more than just that one game, but the chance to bring him in, that certainly magnified their interest in him being a successor to Geno Smith. As far as other things that jumped out to me from today's press conference that had Darnold, had McDonald, had Clint Kubiak, the first thing, I love the fact that Sam Darnold talked about his breakthrough last year in Minnesota happening because of a less is more approach. And there was a couple different times that he discussed this today. First, he was talking about, in high school where if a play broke down, and even college at USC, he felt like he could just scramble around, keep the play going, and then he would eventually find an open receiver. He quickly figured out in the NFL, against NFL athletes, you're not going to be able to do that a lot of the time. And so he has had to learn to hold back that aggressiveness and trying to be too much of a playmaker himself. And then in San Francisco, not just with Clint Kubiak, who obviously was a major influence on his performance last year in Minnesota with the year they spent together with the 49ers, but Brock Purdy, who was the starting quarterback in San Francisco. Darnold talked about the time that he was talking with Purdy, and Purdy just told him he was a point guard. My job is to get the ball to my playmakers. And I think that Sam Darnold has adopted more of that now. He's still going to take his shots. That's his game. He loves to throw the ball downfield. He wants to be aggressive, but that goes back to the idea that he's not trying to do too much, and he's trying to make sure that he is the facilitator of the offense, which is something I don't think he was doing early in his career in New York or Carolina. There were flashes of it, but certainly he has been accountable for that. He has been able to make adjustments, and I think his confidence has went up with some of the people that have been around him, including Kubiak and Brock Purdy. That has set him up for success. The second thing that really jumped out to me is the self-awareness when it comes to areas of continued growth. If you watch the Vikings at the end of the season, they were 14-2 going into the season finale. They lost that game to Detroit, and Darnold struggled in that game. They lost the playoff opener in LA to the Rams. Darnold struggled in that game. And he was very clear about the notes that he took in his head coming out of those couple of games as he continues to learn from his failures. And it boils down to not taking unnecessary sacks near as often, getting the football out quicker, and making sure he's got both hands on the football when he's in the pocket. Little fundamental things like that. And he said he's going to be attacking those deficiencies as soon as the Seahawks are able to get in the field in April. That's going to be a big emphasis for him, is to work on those areas that ended up hurting him at the end of the season. But that is how he has handled every step of the way. He's learned from all those tribulations that he had early in his career. And that goes back to that self-awareness and being able to identify those areas of concern and really attacking them. And so the fact that he's been able to do that leading up to this point, I think the Seahawks have confidence that he's going to improve in those areas that he still needs to get a lot better at, that we saw in the last year, far from a finished product. And the last thing here, Kubiak, I've mentioned his name a few times, but clearly he loomed large in the choice here to sign with Seattle. There were other teams that had interest in Sam Darnold. The stars really aligned with Geno Smith getting traded as quickly as he did right before free agency, and with Sam Darnold having success in Seattle. Both games he started at Lumen Field, including one with the Panthers, he left victorious. So he has played well at Lumen Field. Both those games, it was raining, so you got a quarterback that likes to sling it, as we said the other day in the show. Keep Sam moist. He likes to play in wet weather, and he showed in those two games. But Clint Kubiak, the impact that he had on him in San Francisco on changing the way that he approached the game and how he approached playing the quarterback position and just changing the mindset that he has. That carried over into Minnesota, where he received more really good coaching from Kevin O'Connell and that coaching staff. And so now he's really excited for this chance to work with Kubiak again as the play caller. And he's expecting there's not going to be a full carryover. There's going to be some differences. Kubiak has grown as well, being the coordinator for the Saints last season. But that is where that excitement comes from. They know they need to add more pieces. They know that this is going to be a team-oriented attack, that Sam Darnold by himself isn't going to be winning games. They've got to have the guys around him so that the team is playing well. There's a lot that goes into that, but they are excited about his fit. He's excited about fitting into this offense with a coach that he already knows really well. And he's just excited about where he's at in his career now with the way that he's changed that mindset. And he's going to be around one of those people that helped influence that. So he believes he can carry it forward. The Seahawks believe that as well. Exciting times in Seattle as they usher in a new quarterback. When we come back, got a ton of mailbag questions from you. The 12 is going to dive into as many as I can here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Trust me, the pizza people, they know me by name. I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s that are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's been a long time since we've had an opportunity to bust out a mailbag with all the free agency news. At least at this point, the Seahawks have not signed anyone new today. So since we've got a little bit of a lull in the action here before the next phase of free agency, a great opportunity to tackle your questions. Let's get to them. The first one here, coming off of X from Something Smells Fishy. If Sam Darnold is seen as long-term, do we even bother with someone like Jackson Dart, etc., or maybe a Tyler Shuck, who is about the same age as Darnold too? I've said this all week long since we knew that Sam Darnold was going to sign with the Seahawks. I do not think that this curtails from the Seahawks organization drafting a quarterback if the right player falls to them. I don't think it does. The contract has been set up where if Sam Darnold does not play to the level that they're hoping that he does, they have fairly inexpensive outs starting after this next season. It would be a $19 million dead cap hit. If you draft a quarterback this year that you can groom for a year and Sam Darnold doesn't look like he's going to be your long-term guy, then you can go to that player. They do still have Sam Howell on the roster. They like Jaron Hall. So I don't know if they're going to make that type of a move in this upcoming draft, especially with a quarterback class that is not viewed as a very strong one. But if somebody like Jackson Dart falls to a spot where they are willing to take a quarterback, I don't think Sam Darnold's presence there would stop them from doing that. Maybe they'd be a little more hesitant, but I think there's still a chance they could pick a quarterback, especially late in the draft. John Schneider has been upset about the fact that he has not picked one in several years. They picked two the entire time that he's been in Seattle. I don't know if he's going to force that. I doubt he will. Hasn't really done that in the past, but if the right situation sets it up, I could absolutely still see the Seahawks taking a quarterback. Seahawk fan 5757 on X, what do you think a realistic expectation is for this team next year? Should we expect a bad year heading toward a rebuild or a competitive team? Look, there's a lot of time left in the offseason. We need to see what happens with the rest of free agency. We definitely need to see what happens in next month's draft. before you can start to really paint a complete picture. There's 5 months until the Seahawks are on the field playing in a game. That being said, I don't see this being a rebuilding football team. And it's crazy to say that because you tell me they trade DK Metcalf, they trade Geno Smith, they cut Tyler Lockett. It's hard to say that you can view a team that does that as one that is hoping or planning to contend. But I just talked about Sam Darnold, the year that he had, the confidence this coaching staff has that he's going to continue improving. And this was a top 5 scoring defense the last 8 games. They've retained pretty much all their starters from that group, and then they added DeMarcus Lawrence to that defensive line. The defense is the reason why I do not think that this is a rebuild at all. That is a defense that could be a top 5 caliber group that could carry this football team. And if Sam Darnold is able to keep his turnovers down and the offense is able to get their run game going a little bit, the O-line is better, then this team can absolutely be better than the 10-7 outfit that we saw last year. Now, could it blow up in their faces without Metcalf? And if Darnold doesn't play well, absolutely. This could end up getting ugly for Seattle if you don't have an offense that can put up enough points in today's NFL. But I definitely don't view this as a rebuild. They would be unloading some of these veterans. I don't think they would have been bringing back somebody like a Jaron Reed. They wouldn't have been adding a 32, soon-to-be 33-year-old DeMarcus Lawrence if they thought that this team was not ready to be able to compete in the NFC West and for a spot in the postseason. We'll see what they do the rest of this offseason, building the roster, but I still feel like this is leaning towards this ain't a rebuild. This is still a team they very much expect is going to be competitive and in the mix in the NFC West. Mike C. from New Jersey on X, if the best player available at pick 18 is an edge rusher, do you think the team would add a 5th player to this group? If so, do you think they entertain trade offers for Mafe, Hall, or Nwosu? So that second part of the question, if they pick an edge rusher in the first round, it might be possible that a team calls them about Nwosu or Boye Mafe and floats out a draft pick, and maybe the Seahawks entertain it. But Mike McDonald has talked about this the entire offseason. There's no such thing as too many pass rushers. And I say this with the idea that if someone like Mike Green from Marshall falls down to pick 18, or that they like Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, this is a really deep class at edge rusher, particularly at the top of the draft. The first couple of rounds, it's a top-heavy group, a lot of really good players off the edge. If the Seahawks feel that is the best player available, they should absolutely take that guy, especially because Nwosu's injuries the last couple of years, he could very easily be out after this year if he doesn't play like he did in 2022. Mafe's a free agent the upcoming season. DeMarcus Lawrence is not a long-term guy on this team. If they can get a splashy edge rusher, then absolutely you take that player, and maybe it does open up trades. But I think Seattle would just look at it as a situation where a rich position just got richer. And so I absolutely think there's a chance that they could pick an edge there if that's the best player that's on the board, or at least on their draft board. FTC Pedro on X, how much do you think Mekhi Becton would be asking to sign, looking at his performance last year and the fit with Kubiak and our need for an O-line upgrade? Would it really be overpaying? So if you're asking this from my perspective, I would be willing to pay Becton $12, $13 million a year right now. I'd be willing to do that. But I'm not John Schneider. And as far as scheme fits go, he has played for John Benton, the new offensive line coach. He was with him in New York. Now, he did not enjoy his time in New York, and I don't know that Benton had anything to do with that. There were obviously a lot of other factors at play. The Jets have not been able to compete for a long time for a reason. The organization from top down's got issues. But I don't know if he and John Benton are on great terms or not. I don't know where that fits in. I think he physically could play in this scheme because he is really athletic for 360-plus pounds. And he's 25 years old. He's had some injuries, so that would be my biggest reservation, not the scheme fit. I don't know that Seattle goes down this road. Based on what I've heard, it doesn't sound like they've really looked into that very much. But if Becton stays available for another few days, that might be something where the Seahawks start sniffing around a little bit because of his youth, his athleticism, the fact that he was such a catalyst for that Eagles team winning the Super Bowl up front. Right now, though, it doesn't look like they're necessarily in on that at this point. X-Ray Bird on X, what would be your ideal contract for Garrett Bradbury? I love the thought of pairing him with Sam Darnold again. I mentioned this earlier today when the news came out that the Vikings were planning to release Bradbury if they couldn't trade him. let's just face it, when that comes out 99% of the time, that means he's going to get cut. Teams are not going to be trading for him when there's already a sign out there that this guy is going to get cut. And why would you give up draft picks for somebody like that? They just signed Ryan Kelly in Minnesota. He's the starting center, so there's no spot for Bradbury anymore. I'm expecting they're going to cut him. Now, his performance the last couple of years has declined substantially in pass protection. That immediately is going to spook Seahawks fans. But this is what I put on social media, and I stand by this. If Sam Darnold comes to the Seahawks, if Bradbury becomes a free agent and says, hey, I loved playing with him last year, can we bring him in as my center? I think you absolutely have to do it because Sam Darnold just had his best season playing with him as a center, and he does have the movement skills and athleticism to handle playing in this scheme. He just played in a very similar one in Minnesota. The run blocking was not as big of an issue as the pass protection. Can you get him back on track? He's still a fairly young player. Can you get him back on track with a different set of coaches? I think it's possible. I would not pay him more than $5 or $6 million, though, on an incentive-based deal because, to me, you're getting cut. He's a guy that hasn't played as well the last couple of years. I don't know that there'd be a very fruitful market in terms of money. I think you could get him, especially with the lure of playing with Sam Darnold again. Our next question here from Blue Sky, Charlie Eaton. With Josh Jobe and Reek Woolen hitting free agency next year and Devin Witherspoon set to break the bank, should Seattle be taking a corner in the first 100 picks? 3 of the 4 mock drafts that I have done, I've got one more left before we actually get to the draft. 3 of the 4, I've had Seattle taking a corner by the 5th round. I think they absolutely are going to be aggressive on that front, especially considering Trey Brown is now gone. Artie Burns, who knows if he's going to be back, and if he is, it's just going to be as a depth piece. I do think that corner is kind of an under-the-radar need. Now, if Nehemiah Pritchett takes a big leap in year 2, that certainly helps. But this is a team that's got some answers beyond or questions beyond this year. They need to get answered at that position. So it's not a great cornerback draft class, but it's a solid one. And I think you can get good value in the middle rounds. And that's what I would be looking for if I'm the Seattle Seahawks at the cornerback spot. And our last question here from Hustle Chilson. I'm curious about the physical process when a player is signed. Basically, I'm wondering why the Seahawks couldn't have agreed to terms with Fries since all the signings are physical pending anyways. Well, here's the difference. From the understanding of the way that John Schneider painted it, like they didn't even want to put an offer on the table until they had a physical. And the guy was coming off of a broken tibia. So I don't blame him for that. You don't want to put that offer on the table. And I think it creates some issues when you're putting all your eggs in the basket and you already have the contract out there and you have them signing it pending physical. The Vikings were cared far less about that. They just like, well, we're just going to give you the contract. Of course he has to pass the physical, but he wanted to get this process accelerated. The Seahawks were saying, you need to wait a day. He didn't want to do that. And so that's really the difference here when we're looking. It's kind of a semantics related issue, but that's how it played out. And Seattle also was looking at the guaranteed money and stuff. There were other factors here. They're going to point at the injury and physical stuff. That was obviously important, but there were some other things that didn't exactly line up with this that ended up leading to Fries going to Minnesota. When I come back, free agency is still fairly early, but it's drying up in terms of the amount of talent out there. I'm going to look at a key factor that can help fans predict what the Seahawks are going to do signing future players, at least based on what we've seen so far. I'll be diving into that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're only 2 days into free agency. The official start day was yesterday. The Seahawks did not make any signings today. Players that they had already been reported to sign signed their contract, but no new signings today. They've got a couple of free agents that are going to be visiting the VMAC this week. We've reached that phase here, but there's still plenty of talent out there, and certainly there's some big names that are being kicked around with the Seahawks. And it's quite a 180 from last year. There's one factor that is clearly jumping out that didn't a year ago. When Mike Macdonald took the reins as the new first-time head coach, I was under the impression that we would see him and the coaching staff really be aggressive trying to get players that they had coached before. I thought there'd be a couple former Baltimore Ravens that would be in the mix. I thought we would see some guys that had played for a few of the assistant coaches on defense, maybe some Washington Huskies that Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff knew. And yet that really wasn't necessarily the case. You had Jonathan Hankins and Tyrell Dodson had played for Leslie Frazier in Buffalo. But aside from that, most of the free agent signings, they didn't have those kind of connections with the Seahawks coaching staff. This year has been the exact opposite. You start with Sam Darnold. I mentioned the Kubiak connection with him being the new offensive coordinator. Those two really tight from their time in San Francisco. DeMarcus Lawrence played for Adden Durde for 3 years in Dallas and holds the utmost respect for him. That was one of the big reasons he signed with Seattle, the chance to play for him again in the Pacific Northwest. And Marquez Valdez-Scantling played for Kubiak in New Orleans last year. So you look at all these free agent signings the Seahawks have made, other than Josh Jones, who has played in a similar system, just not for any of these coaches, but has played in a similar system, and he was with the Ravens last year. Mike Macdonald certainly could reach out to some coaches in Baltimore where he used to work. The connection aspect has been big, and I think that can provide some tips for where the Seahawks may go next. And I want to start with a name. This has been the one that has been super popular. Everybody, listen, I could have had a full mailbag with this question, but I decided to put it in this segment. Cooper Kupp, who obviously heralds from Yakima, Washington, played at Eastern Washington University. He has Pacific Northwest ties. He's been killing the Seahawks in a Rams uniform for nearly a decade. The opportunity to potentially go out and get him. The Seahawks are very much in the mix there, as they should be, with the lack of receivers they have after losing DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And the other reason that this makes sense, aside from just the fact that he's a Pacific Northwest homegrown product that played college ball and high school ball in the state of Washington, he also has links on this coaching staff. Jake Peetz, the pass game coordinator, was on the Rams staff for multiple seasons under Sean McVay, and he knows Cooper Kupp very well. So you have that built-in connection like we've seen with a lot of free agents. Every report out there saying teams are kind of balking at the money that he's looking for with the injuries he's had. There's a reason the Rams moved on, but still as a productive player, I think that there is a good chance the Seattle Seahawks go down this road because of Jake Peetz. I think Peetz is going to say this is a good fit for this offense with Clint Kubiak. I think he's going to be a really good security blanket for Sam Darnold, and you need that with the offensive line the way that it's set up right now. So I think Kupp is a guy that very much could be a Seattle Seahawk, and I think the connection's a big part of it. If you look at Clint Kubiak's connections in New Orleans, there's two players that jump out. I thought we might be talking about Juwan Johnson, but he re-signed. The tight end went back to the Saints. If Seattle does not get Tevin Jenkins, which right now it seems like that is very much a 50-50 proposition and that they're not going to invest too much money in him. Lucas Patrick had a rock-solid year for New Orleans last year. He's 31. He's an older player, but he would fit that veteran that they need to have in the interior. He knows the scheme. He has the athleticism. He's played some center before as well, so there's some positional flexibility. And Adam Prentice, the fullback. They are going to get a fullback at some point. Prentice played for Kubiak last year. He's not a threat to run the ball, not going to catch a lot of passes, but he's a really solid lead blocker. You can move him around the formation, and he can play special teams. He checks off the boxes you're looking for fullbacks, and Kubiak trusted him. He played him a ton of snaps last year. So I think that Prentice very well could come to Seattle and reunite with Clint Kubiak. With that being said, if we're talking about coaching connections, we already mentioned the 49ers connection there with Sam Darnold. Kyle Juszczyk, another guy that's been killing the Seahawks for a long time, perennial All-Pro, Pro Bowl fullback. The 49ers just cut him as part of their massive purge. Their salary cap purge feels like they are going to be missing 75% of their roster from last year. They are doing a fresh start at most positions. Juszczyk is in Pittsburgh visiting with the Steelers. So who knows if they let him leave. But if they do, I absolutely think the Seahawks are going to get in on this. I cannot see a path where Clint Kubiak and the Seahawks are not going to be trying to get their hands on Kyle Juszczyk, who would be such a fun weapon in this offense that has the Shanahan footprint all over it. And we see what he has done in Kyle Shanahan's offense. I think he'd be a fantastic fit, and the chance to get back into 49ers for cutting him twice a year. I would keep an eye on Kyle Juszczyk. For the most part, offense is where I feel like the Seahawks are going to be in attack mode from here on out. They did get DeMarcus Lawrence. I do want to throw a couple of their names out, though, because, again, there's no such thing as too many edge rushers, defensive linemen. 2 players with Ravens links to keep an eye on. On the outside, Matthew Judon, who was with the Falcons last year, getting to be a little older player, just like DeMarcus Lawrence, but incredibly high IQ player. Mike McDonald coached him as a linebacker coach in Baltimore. The two are very close. If they're looking for another veteran that can come in and impact games, and Judon is willing to take more of a diminished role, maybe that's a possibility. I do think DeMarcus Lawrence coming in makes it unlikely that happens, but just a name to throw out there that does have the coaching ties here. Josh Bynes also played with him, and Bynes is their assistant linebacker coach. There's a number of links there. And also on the defensive line, if you're looking for a guy that can play 3-tech, can play big end, that can help with your depth, Brent Urban has had some pretty good years in Mike McDonald's defense in Baltimore. And he's one of those guys that never has splashy stats, but he is an important player up front, does a lot of the dirty work. You can never have too many big bodies that play that style of defense. So both those players with Ravens ties to Mike McDonald, I think, could make a lot of sense at the right price, even with Lawrence being added. I'm not expecting any major splash signings on defense at this point. Lawrence was that guy, but one of those players that has played for McDonald before at the right price could still potentially come on as a depth addition. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow on our latest Blue Friday edition, we're going to be revisiting some of our hot takes from pre-off season, and we're going to make some adjustments as we go into wave 2 and wave 3 of free agency. Going to be a really fun episode. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Go Hawks.